It's that iconic sound that reminds me of the good times we once had. And it's just crazy thinking that 2 decades after the Nintendo DS's release date, we are just sitting on a treasure trove of games that made up a good part of my childhood. So in commemoration, I figured I would dust off the old handheld and take it for a spin. But this time, trying some games that I haven't touched yet. So where would be a good place for me to start? I usually turn to GameFaqs.com when it comes to a compiled list of games I wanted to peruse. They often have an easy to navigate top rated list, and we'll be taking a look at some of their picks and seeing if these games pass the test of time or even deserve to be on this highest rated list. Hey everybody, just a quick disclaimer, this video is a re-upload from a video I did years ago. Long story short, my channel did get it deleted and I was unable to recover most of its contents, but I did recover these listicle videos. And just a quick note that this is a nice kind of rebranding / rebirth of something I wanted to do for a while, so this channel is kind of the beginning of that. So hope you guys enjoy and hope to see you down the road. Peace. At first examination, I noticed that there are 50 games to choose from their highest rated list. And looking through some of these, I'm surprised that there are some picks that I expected to be on here that are not on here. Games such as Castlevania Orders of Ecclesia, which I thought was a really high quality game, and also the funny and clever Bowser's Inside Story, which capitalizes on those gameplay mechanics from Super Mario RPG. I was starting to question the credibility of this GameFaqs list, but I'm going to give it a chance. Starting with the first game that caught my attention on this list, ranked at number 47, there is Red the Hunter, Solitorobo. So this title really flew under my radar. It's not until now that I'm finding out about it. I don't remember any ads or even word of mouth of mention for this game. But I will say I was drawn to this art style. It's a Namco Bandai action platformer, and it follows the hard-headed protagonist Red with his trusty mech as he traverses a steampunk-inspired world. And the first thing you're going to notice, of course, is the presentation. They're just nice, colorful set pieces here. Each location and stage are just well-crafted vistas with a bright color palette, and the character designs are based off the works of Chrono Cross and Escaflowne art director Nobuteru Yuki. And you can really see the meticulous detail here with the character designs, with the enemy designs, and even the backgrounds are just filled with life. I wish I could say more about this for the gameplay, and while not bad, it is kind of bare bones. So the format is you travel from town to town, picking up different kinds of side quests, engaging in gathering collectibles. There's a arena mode as well to level up your mecha. As for combat, it's pretty simple. You're pretty much mashing the A button to kind of wrestle enemies per se. You throw them around. You eventually do get abilities to use your arms in other ways in the mecha. You have the ability to also step out of your mecha to walk around, which does lend to a lot of platformer puzzle solving, which is pretty cool. The boss fights look very nice, and they do offer their own unique mechanics, whether you have to kind of bait them or catch one of their projectiles or not, throw them around so that you can gain access to one of their weapons to shoot them. It does have some variety there, but for the most part, it's nothing special. There is some light RPG mechanics there. You can definitely level up your mech and customize parts to give you better damage or armor, for example. But definitely what stood out to this game is just the visuals. Even for a Nintendo DS game, this is a very pretty game. The music as well hits. The user interface also blends well with the setting of the game. It's easy to navigate while also being nice to look at. I could definitely see why this title is on the top 50 list. Few Nintendo DS games do match this visual fidelity. And even for a Nintendo DS game, the developers perfectly crafted the art direction to blend in with the gameplay. So moving on here, our next title is ranked at number 39, Super Robot Tyson Endless Frontier. So Super Robot Tyson, this is made actually by Monolith Soft of Xenoblade fame. So before Xenoblade Chronicles, they were making titles such as this, which is interesting, so I kind of had high hopes. This seems to be an established JRPG series that I'm unfamiliar with. This is my first time experiencing this, but apparently they have a lot of iterations across platforms. But for a JRPG, I'm a fan of the genre, and I think there's a lot to take away from here. Of course, it is pretty standard in some areas. For example, there are still random encounters, and it requires you to really grind and repeat to get past a boss or an area. And then you do have your dose of fan service. There are some anime tropes here in terms of like scantily clad heroines and very disproportionate jiggle physics, but you know, some people are gonna like that. And then there are the RPG systems, abilities that require SP, and equipping gear, you know, standard stuff. But there are some features here that do stand out for the genre, and one of those I'm gonna mention is the combat mechanic, which really reminds me of the battle systems from Namco x Capcom, the Project X Zone series as well, and some modern games like Indivisible all have this kind of combo random encounter battle system. And pretty much instead of just simply attacking with one command, you're kind of stringing together a series of combos via button presses, and doing that will build your kind of finisher gauge, and you'll want that to get to max so you finish off with a really devastating attack, which keeps things interesting. You can also swap out characters to extend the combo, and I'd say for a JRPG, this is well needed to kind of get rid of the monotony you'll find in these kind of titles. I really did like the presentation in this game. It's a very sci-fi inspired story and setting, and it is definitely an ode to old school pixel art like from the Super Nintendo days. But what really stands out as far as art direction is the soundtrack. Every time I went to a new area or level, I would just kind of take in the music. It was really fitting, and it's just a really good love letter to like old school 16-bit, 8-bit music. And as you can see here, listen to some of these soundtracks, they really stick out to you. So this game, I would say there is a lot of charm here, but as far as today's standards, I don't really see anything that would keep me around or keep me playing it. I feel like hard JRPG fans will absolutely love and have the patience for this. There is some funny dialogue here to have. I think the characters are very likable, but what really kind of slowed my pace down was the difficulty. It does require, like in any JRPG, it does require copious amounts of grinding and commitment to it. Okay, so next up we have Jump Ultimate Stars, ranked at number 30 on the GameFaqs highest rated list. So Jump Ultimate Stars is what you get when you cross Super Smash Bros., but replace the roster with every iconic Shonen Jump character that you know. And then sprinkle in some Marvel vs. Capcom tag mechanics, and also some light RPG mechanics. So right off the bat, this game is obviously a tribute to the iconic Shonen Jump brand. You can see here very popular anime characters such as Luffy from One Piece, Goku from Dragon Ball. You even have some other not as well known. You have characters from D. Gray Man. You have characters from Black Cat, which is one of my favorites. And they really do a good job in honoring the source material. The storytelling and the presentation is told in the format of manga panels, which is very fitting. If you're a diehard anime fan, the artwork here will really speak to you. I especially like the stages where you're fighting in designated areas based off that specific manga series, but it's all in manga panels. So for example, you can kind of break off the walls, these manga pages, and that would be a way to kind of throw off your opponent. But to speak on the gameplay, It is surprisingly deep for a Super Smash Bros. Lite. For the gameplay specifics, you have 2 characters you can swap from, and each character has their set of moves based off the buttons you press and the direction that you press it in. For example, if you hold down and your normal standard attack button, you'll do a kind of guard break. If you hold up in your standard attack button, you'll do a kind of counter attack, and vice versa when you hold left and right. The same goes for your special button. You can hold different kinds of directions, and you can chain them all together to kind of build together a nice flashy combo. And this also works with their tag team mechanic, which you can tag team other Shonen Jump characters to extend a combo. For example, here I have Goku tagging in to extend my combo, in effect pushing them off the ledge. And one more thing about the gameplay that I really did like was the manga panel RPG system. You'll see on the bottom that you'll have a set of manga panels, and you can mix and match certain pictures and characters to kind of boost your main 2 character stats, or put in some tag mechanics. And there are hundreds of them. There's such a good variety of characters to choose from, and that's one thing that really makes this so high quality, that there's no shortage of Shonen Jump characters, different kinds of special moves, different kinds of tag teams, and you'll see every iconic face that there is to see in your specific series. So I'm really surprised that this never made it to the States, because maybe if anime was at that point, it could have made it here at the time, but definitely if this came out now, maybe a remaster to the States, people would eat this up. Maybe replace some manga characters with more recent iterations, but definitely this game definitely deserves a spot on this top 50 list. At number 4, we have Elite Beat Agents, which just made the list at number 50 on the GameFaqs list. At the surface, Elite Beat Agents is a rhythm video game, and it complements the touch stylus feature of the DS, where you can tap to the beat of the song, which includes dragging and spinning, pretty standard stuff for a rhythm game. However, when you look closer, you'll find that underneath a rhythm video game is a playful and engaging storyline cleverly intertwined with the gameplay. You play as an Elite Beat Agents task force who goes around trying to solve other people's problems. And these range from getting a babysitter to watch over some kids, all the way to a crazy alien invasion, to something wholesome like getting a dog back to its owner. I think there's a strong incentive here that you wouldn't find in other rhythm games. I was always anticipating what my performance would mean for each storyline. Whether I failed or passed, there would be some kind of whimsical outcome that really lent to the enjoyment of this game. For example, failing the first stage of this song means that the ninja trying to make up this elaborate disguise fumbles, and the outcome is pretty hilarious and creative. And there are a lot of instances like this throughout the game. One gripe I do have with this game is the song library. So there are some classic songs, but there are also some outdated pop songs from the 2000s era. This is fine, except they are just covers of these songs, and the covers do sound a little off at times. It's a little nitpick, but for a rhythm game this goes a long way. Nevertheless, this is a high quality rhythm game. It has some grounded rhythm mechanics with a really entertaining storyline and presentation. Now, I will do a hot take here. Despite all the things that Elite Beat Agents gets right, I think there's still one game that exceeds Elite Beat Agents in those ways, and that's Rhythm Heaven. I think Rhythm Heaven did it best in terms of coalescing gameplay elements with the music. It's interesting to see that Rhythm Heaven did not even make the top 50 list. The next game we have up is Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars, ranked at 46 on the GameFaqs list. Chinatown Wars is an interesting case. You have a family-friendly console like the NDS, and Chinatown Wars kind of stands out in that regard. In this GTA title, Rockstar developers go back to its roots by making it a top-down, open-world type game. This was actually a very welcome addition to the games that I've been playing, because I've been really into kind of Scorsese crime films as of late. And I will say this storyline did hit the spot. You follow Huang Li as he travels abroad to find out the whereabouts of his murdered father, who also happens to be a drug lord in Chinatown. The story is everything you'd expect from a GTA game, with some crass humor, themes of betrayal, backstabbing, narcissism, and gang violence. The storyline did hook me, and I was always curious who was going to turn the other cheek and backstab Huang. As far as the open world goes, I did appreciate that the open world Vice City had some substance. There are some interactions in the city, such as a pedestrian being run over only to be carried away in an ambulance, or the responses of cars as you near miss them driving through the freeway. Gameplay wise, this plays like any other GTA. You have your sequence of missions and side quests. In this particular one, since you work for a drug narcotics boss, you're trying to see who's the highest bidder as far as certain narcotics. You're also stealing cars. You're regaining certain turf that was taken away from some gangs. For a semi-open world, there are actually a heap of activities to indulge in. Now the combat was kind of frustrating to deal with. Strafing and firing in this game does not feel very intuitive, as well as driving. It's really easy to crash your car. I just felt like I was fighting the controller, trying to get some shots in or trying to lock onto a target. What I do appreciate about the gameplay though, is the way the developers kind of took advantage of the touchscreen and blended it in with some gameplay. For example, breaking into a car, you'll have to put some touchscreen inputs to hotwire or put in a coded keypad, as well as the GPS system in this game, which makes it very intuitive to go to the next mission or go to a location. All in all, this is a pretty unique Nintendo DS game, and I can see why it's on this list. I think Rockstar kind of knocked it out, just sticking to the things they were good at in this one, and they really held to the spirit of these kind of games. So next up, we have a not so unfamiliar title. This is the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, a roguelike RPG made by Chunsoft. This game appears to be just a Pokemon facelift of those games from the genre, but it does have some interesting charm and mechanics that can't be found elsewhere. So the gameplay loop requires you to traverse a series of dungeons, and that's done so by a grid-like system where every move or action will also force your enemy somewhere on the map to also react or move. And so you're going to have to contemplate what your next move will be in order to get to the end of the dungeon. It's a tried and true system. And when you engage enemies, you have to keep in mind their elemental weakness, which as a Pokemon game, this blends in so well with the gameplay. I think that's where the strength lies in the gameplay for these kinds of games. Each Pokemon has their own moveset and their own defined weakness, and it's up to you to exploit them. You also have items you can use such as rocks to lob them a couple spaces away, so it is a game of spacing yourself as well as which ability to use as the most efficient. And there are some RPG elements there. For example, you can equip some items to make you stronger. I just found it really hilarious that my Chimchar was equipped with a light bow for extra damage. Presentation wise, the sprite animations in this game are great. Seeing your partner walk by you as you traverse each kind of dungeon, and each dungeon has their own elemental feel, whether it be rocky, grassy, etc. One more thing to take away from this game as a plus are the kind of whimsical personalities for every Pokemon that you meet, and the dynamics between the Pokemon guild you find yourself cooperating with, as well as the bad guys that kidnap or sabotage other Pokemon. This doesn't add much to the gameplay, but it's just cool to see the kind of Pokemon characterizations that we didn't get in other Pokemon versions. There's just something pleasant about watching your guild all come together after a hard mission, just stuffing their face at a buffet. I will say though, like any JRPGs, this game takes a lot to get into. So you need to have the patience to get past the first hour, because it's a lot of dialogue, a lot of tutorial and hand holding, just for you to get to the meat of the game. But I think it's worth it, especially for those RPG and Pokemon fans that want something different. Now, it looks like there are more recent iterations of this title on the Nintendo Switch. I'm not sure if this one is worth coming back to, but I will say that the developers did a good job of not making this just another cheap imitation of an already established genre, just with some Pokemon wallpaper added to it. and I'm sure that this was a humble beginning to a very good franchise. Okay, last but not least, we have Etrian Odyssey 3, ranked at number 34 on the GameFaqs list. This is an Atlas-made game, the creators behind the Persona series, and there are 2 other iterations of Etrian Odyssey on the same console. It's up to debate which one is the best, but I think 3 is definitely in the discussion. With those unfamiliar, Etrian Odyssey is a dungeon crawler JRPG. You start from a central hub where you can change your class, rest, buy equipment, and once you're all prepped, you journey into a massive labyrinth, going from floor to floor as the difficulty scales, finding items along the way, stronger monsters to craft better weapons and items, all in doing so with a 5-member party, each with different stats, different classes, and specialties. Pretty standard stuff, but what I think Etrian Odyssey does well and differently from other dungeon crawlers is the mapping system that they have, which works very well for the 2-screen NDS setup. The bottom screen of the DS lets you remap your journey, and you have several icons you can place in each room to kind of mark points of interest for yourself. For example, did you find a certain shortcut through a wall? You can always put a door icon there just to give you a reminder. And like most dungeon crawlers, this is a very challenging experience. I think the addiction here for me was the kind of risk and reward system they put out here. I had to think to myself, how much farther did I want to go into the labyrinth, risking my resources and party members just to find out what's in the next grid, or crossing my fingers hoping that there would be a kind of safe haven for me to heal. There is also a lot of customization and variety here. You have a total of 12 different characters and classes to choose from, but it's your clever synergy of your group of party members that'll get you through each floor that made this game feel very rewarding. For example, in my team I had a Prince class which pretty much focused on support and imbuing elements into other characters' weapons, and then I had a tank which would take the brunt of the damage, and then with 3 other DPS classes, a mage, a ninja, and a hunter. It's clear that Atlas has mastered these systems, and I'm gonna keep coming back to these series because there's always something that they tweak or that they improve to make this gameplay experience more enjoyable. And in the case of third title, it's definitely worth coming back to the NDS version because you have the double screen to take advantage of the mapping, which you won't find in the Switch version. It was halfway into this console's life cycle that I was able to get my hands on this bad boy. But rather than the blue and bulky version some of you might be familiar with, I was gifted the slick and shiny upgrade that was the Game Boy Advance SP. It goes without saying, you would not find me without this thing when I was a kid. So today I'm pretty stoked to give this console another spin, but this time trying out games that I wasn't able to the first time around. Of course, I'll be turning to GameFaqs' highest rated list to kind of be a guide for me on this journey. And if this is your first time here, welcome. I make a habit out of checking out treasure gems on older consoles. And feel free to check out the Nintendo DS list that I did for some good NDS reminiscing. But without further ado, let's check out 7 Game Boy Advance games on GameFaqs' highest rated list. At closer inspection, this list seems to have a lot of games that are very iterative. They're either really good ports from other consoles, or they happen to be games that I've already poured hours into. Some of my honorable mentions are of course the JRPGs on this console. The Game Boy Advance was a powerhouse for JRPGs, especially the tactical ones, and Advance Wars was kind of my introduction to the series. And then the excellent Fire Emblem, as well as Final Fantasy Tactics, kind of cemented my addiction to these kind of games. So if you wanted to try a Tactics JRPG, definitely can't recommend this console anymore. The excellent Area of Sorrows Castlevania, another successor to Symphony of the Night, except this time you play as Dracula's reincarnation Soma, and the gameplay revolves around you absorbing souls from monsters, which becomes the foundation for your spells and your abilities, and your weapons, A very good Metroidvania on this console. This one you shouldn't skip. And then lastly is the entirety of the Battle Network series, but specifically Mega Man Battle Network 3, the white version, was one I poured countless hours into. This game takes everything I love about Mega Man and turns it into a kind of JRPG, action JRPG. There's a lot of customization here, and there's a lot of charm here as well. Definitely check this out if you're a Mega Man fan and you like JRPGs. So we're gonna start off pretty strong on this list. Ranked at number 14, this is Metroid Zero Mission. Now, I'll admit, Zero Mission was my first foray into 2D Metroid games. My experience with the series has always been strictly to the 3D Metroid titles. Yes, even Other M, which I love by the way. Please don't come for me. That being said, why did I ever skip these titles? Zero Mission is a retelling of the original Metroid from 1986, complete with updated visuals and gameplay mechanics. And let me be the first to say that this feels like the perfect combination of music, atmosphere, and exploration that made me fall in love with the Metroid Prime series. I can't recall a single dull moment playing through Zero Mission. The game starts you off with just your blaster and morph ball, and then you'll progress through these environments utilizing your understanding of your surroundings, whether that be a crack wall that you have to blast through, or these tight spaces you can only get through your morph ball. And then further progression grants you more weapons and equipment, like this ice beam that lets you turn enemies into these platforms, or a super sprint ability allowing you to charge through walls. The core gameplay here is very addicting. You have that tried and true Metroid formula, and then some. There is a lot of polishing here that's subtle, but I really did appreciate it, such as the placement of some enemy encounters. There are some rooms you'll enter that seem non-problematic, but then out of nowhere you get attacked by this worm-like monstrosity. And these surprises are sprinkled throughout the game, and it really lends to what I think Metroid Zero Mission was going for, and that's simulating this intense spacefaring alien adventure. Some quality of life features that I wanted to point out are these map rooms that are found throughout. These rooms will give you an indication of where to head next, but they won't necessarily restrict you to that objective. So as far as exploring goes, the sky's the limit, and it really complements this large sprawling map. But for me, I think the biggest takeaway is this sense of atmosphere that Metroid as a series really hammers in very well, complete with this iconic sci-fi soundtrack, and then an art style that helps you distinguish between these different biomes and environments. This feeling of isolation and a kind of journey into the unknown was always ever present in my playthrough. And so it was equally satisfying seeing Samus overcome these odds, which would culminate in these climactic boss set pieces. Metroid Zero Mission does bosses very well here. Ranked at 66, Wario Land 4. The origin of Wario, Mario's deranged alter ego, was always a mystery to me. My understanding of this character came from the Super Smash Bros. Series, but honestly, this game posed more questions than it did answers, such as his moveset requiring him to use flatulence as a weapon, and also what's the significance of garlic. Wario Land 4 does not quite answer these questions, but it does lend to the zany and quirky personality that is Wario and the chaotic world that he comes from. Wario Land 4 is a platformer not unlike his Mario counterpart. Despite that, this title makes an identity for their own with these good platformer mechanics. So similar to the Kirby games where Kirby absorbs his enemies, or even the Super Mario Odyssey games where Mario captures enemies' abilities, Wario can manipulate the enemy's attacks to grant him some platformer abilities. This includes a bee stinging him, which swells him up, granting him some levitating abilities. He has these other enemies that throw food into his mouth, which makes him gain weight, in turn allowing him to ground pound through tough obstacles.
And then you have Wario's tidal charge ability, and with some skill you can use this ability to pick up momentum as well as speed. And mastery of these mechanics makes for a fast-paced platformer.
Ranked at 76, Dragon Ball Z Boost Fury.
If you were a young kid during the Toonami era of cartoons, then chances were that you were a Dragon Ball Z fan. At least for myself, it was really easy for me to consume any kind of Dragon Ball Z based product. This is an action RPG beat 'em up, and it follows the anime series, specifically the Buu saga, and it's pretty accurate to the source material, but I will say that the gameplay mechanics here are a little lacking in some areas. Your gameplay is limited to spamming the attack button with the occasional special move. You also have the option to change into different forms such as Super Saiyan. This yields you more stat boosts as well as speed. Sprinkled in are some light RPG elements such as equipment and gauging your stats. I was pleased to see that there are a variety and roster of characters you can use, such as Trunks and Vegeta, as well as of course Goku and his son Gohan. Sadly, these movesets for the varying characters are a little too similar for my taste. The graphics and the music are just average. It just seems like this game was pulled out of a kind of RPG Maker system. That's not to say that there are not any good features here. I think there are. I think what this game and the series really does well is hitting those nostalgic beats to remind you of how great the Dragon Ball series is. For example, I couldn't help but smile playing as Great Saiyan Man, going around saving civilians, also reliving those epic battles such as Goku vs Majin Vegeta. I think the game definitely paid proper tribute to these moments in sprite fashion, even though there were a abridged version, but it was like a sincere paraphrasing of the series. If you're looking for an action RPG experience alone, then it's hard to recommend this one, especially with the other action RPG options that are on this console.
At 39, we have F-Zero Climax.
I feel like we've had a resurgence of F-Zero fans ever since F-Zero 99 came out, which is the Battle Royale reimagining of the classic NES title. But it's nice to go back to the titles leading up to the success, and in the Game Boy Advance's case, that's F-Zero Climax. Not much has changed since the original NES version, but in this case, that's a good thing. This racing title showcases an interesting racing mechanic not found in other racing titles, and that is that your speed boost is tied to your health as well, so it creates this kind of risk or reward type gameplay. The gameplay is a dance of judging at what point should you use your speed boost and risk depleting your health bar, because again, a lot of things affect your health here, such as bumping into the track walls, bumping into other players, and so it becomes a very delicate dance. But also you have these bumper buttons to shift left and right. Pressing them together makes you do this spinning attack on other enemies. You also have the option to choose other characters with varying stats, whether that be stronger durability or stronger acceleration or boost. The racetracks here, while not as diverse as the, say, Mario Kart series, each racetrack consists of twists and turns, your option to go on these yellow boosts or these pink roads which regenerate your boost / health. There's also some opportunities for shortcuts. But I think the appeal for myself are the amazing detail in the tracks as far as the backgrounds, as well as the banging soundtrack that this game has. Each stage features a beautiful sprite art style, and you will go through different settings and locations, such as a kind of desert, or you'll be racing in a kind of sky vista, or even a metropolis city. So the settings are pretty diverse, and the music as well is just so complimentary. To accompany this high-octane fast gameplay, you're met with these electric guitar riffs, and it's no surprise why the F-Zero games come out with such iconic tracks and music, because take a listen, these are just so good.
You're holding a lead.
There are also a lot of modes here that prove useful. There's a track practice mode, which lets you perfect those turns for specific sections of a track. And then there's this interesting track create mode, which lets you make a race track and you can dictate where the boosts are gonna be or where the turn happens. I kind of dabbled into this mode, but it is a nice option for those that are more into that kind of stuff. But as far as the Game Boy Advance is concerned, the racing games are very limited, but this is definitely one kind of diamond in the rough that I definitely recommend you picking up, especially if you're into the F-Zero series. I think in the community, F-Zero Climax has been really highly regarded.
Finish!
Ranked at 69, Drill Dozer.
I was really surprised to find out that the creators of Drill Dozer were also the ones responsible for the Pokemon games, and it really begs the question, where did all the quality and innovation go in the Game Freak development team that was present here in Drill Dozer, because Drill Dozer on its own was such a high quality platformer. So the first thing you're going to notice in this title is the great art style here. I'm a huge fan of the sprite design as well as the UI interface, seemingly juxtaposition with the bright colored steampunk inspired setting. The locations here range from these high city skyscrapers to these nicely designed museums. It's also going to take you underwater. Some locations you're going to be in this jungle. There's a lot of diversity here for sure. And then the same can be said for the sound design in this game. The sounds here are very crisp, with a kicking 16-bit inspired soundtrack to the palpable sound of crushing debris and a penetrating mechanical drill, which is only made better with the rumble adapter that comes with the game. Yes, you can count on Nintendo to introduce accessories even to their handheld consoles, and with this game, it really just adds that rumble feature present in modern controllers. The core gameplay centers around you taking charge of this destructive drill robot. Gameplay consists of going from level to level, drilling through enemies, walls, or anything that might impede your path. And also, you'll be collecting gears to increase the rate of your drill, and the higher you increase your gear, the more destructive your drill becomes. But the drill is just half of the gameplay here. Using the drill, you're able to manipulate the environment in certain ways. This includes jolting yourself in the air using the torque of the drill. You're also drilling through these tunnels to make a pathway. You're swimming, and you're also using the drill to engage some traps or certain mechanics. I can definitely see this being a treasure gem on the Game Boy Advance. With a handheld saturated with platformers, I think Drill Dozer definitely manages to stand out in awesome ways.
Now, if only Game Freak can just get it together and release quality content like they used to, that would be great. Solar Boy Django at 51.
Now, if I knew that Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear Solid fame made this action fantasy RPG with a bright colored anime palette on the Game Boy Advance, I would be the first in line to get this title. And though I'm a little late to the game, I'm happy to find out that this title introduces detail-oriented gameplay mechanics that scream Kojima goodness.
Whoa!
Boktai 2 Solar Boy Django
Is a isometric adventure RPG in the vein of Diablo or Tunic, and it has some standout elements, including another Game Boy Advance accessory, the solar attachment, which
detects and stores sunlight.
more on this later, but you play as a vampire slaying hero as he uncovers dark secrets in the land of San Miguel. Initially stripped of his title pistol, he obtains several different weapon types, all with varying properties such as the ability to break crates, or the advantage of range to hit switches. He also uses the power of sunlight, which the attachment will come into play. So playing in actual real time within the sun will actually net you solar energy. And there are some surprising ways that this is used in the game. Storing solar energy also gives you more mana or MP to use abilities, and you can also use it to your advantage to damage vulnerable enemies. It's also used for certain puzzle solving aspects, and it's used as currency as well to buy items or equipment.
I can imagine this being a headache when it comes to the glare, or if you happen to live in Australia where the sun is a hell orb. Thankfully, you don't have to solely rely on this mechanic because there's a lot of other features here that will keep you coming back, and I identified them as being very unashamedly Kojima-esque. For example, in each level you go through, there is this kind of stealth element to the gameplay. You get to hide along walls and peek corners, even knocking on the wall to lure your enemies in, very MGS-like by the way. You also get access to other elementals and forms. At a certain point in the game, Django gets access to another form, which gives him other abilities such as transforming into a bat to fly around, and he also gains access to other spells to help him with certain puzzles or certain enemies. One interesting gameplay feature that I found here is that at the end of each level you fight this boss, and rather than killing the boss will retreat into a coffin, so it's up to you to kind of drag that coffin around to your main town hub. And then there's this site in the town hub where you'll have to undergo this purification process, which completely destroys that boss because the main villains in this game are pretty powerful vampires that could only be destroyed using a certain kind of ritual. So the gameplay mechanics here are as deep as a Hideo Kojima game can get. I don't think there's a game on this console that leads with this level of complexity, so I really appreciated trying out this title. I also didn't mind the setting of San Miguel. Feels like this kind of westerner in a apocalyptic setting, so that was pretty unique. But this is definitely going to be on my list of hidden gems, and I can't recommend this title anymore. Being that it is a Hideo Kojima game, it is just a good game as well on itself.
Ranked all the way at the top, we have Mother 3 at number 1.
What could be said about Mother 3 that has not been said already? A game brimming with personality, a unique and addicting turn-based battle system, and characters and storytelling that will really stick with you for a very long time. Yeah, it's all been said before, but for myself and my introduction to the Earthbound series, it just feels like something more. Recently, I've experienced the loss of a parent, and there's this scene here in Mother 3 that really encapsulated everything that I was feeling all in one scene. And it was at this moment that I knew that Mother 3 was more than just a game. And if games were art, I think Mother 3 would definitely be proof of that. Mother 3 is an excellent title, not just for games, but for media in general. And to not consider a remake or even a late localization just seems like a really sorely missed opportunity. I can go into detail why I think that is, but I really feel like I'd be doing you a disservice if you haven't tried this game already. So instead, I'll leave you with a montage of some of my favorite moments from the first half.
And it should definitely be up there with one of the greats, in my opinion.
We would like to play.
So who here can remember the Nintendo Wii's release like if it was ripped out of a fever dream, with all of these wild Nintendo ad campaigns? You had the introduction of the Mii characters spawning all of these hilarious creations, and Nintendo had no business releasing this banger of a Wii menu themed soundtrack. Almost 2 decades and a few handful of broken TVs later, the Wii library has expanded to over 2,500 titles. A lot of them beloved entries from my childhood that I spent countless hours on. Great memories, but this only scratched the surface of what the Wii had to offer. And with too many titles to sift through, it only made sense to turn to a website that makes choosing treasure gems easier. Come with me on this adventure as I take a look at 7 Nintendo Wii games from GameFaqs' highest rated list. Alright, first up we got Klonoa at 83. So Klonoa is a 2.5D side-scrolling platformer. The first title released in the heydays of the PS1, and since then it's gathered quite a strong following, at least enough to warrant a Nintendo Wii remake. So this is a remake of the first game, except with a kind of graphic overhaul. The music and the art style definitely lends to a very wholesome, good feeling kind of vibe, kind of fitting for this game to be on a Nintendo platform. But the gameplay, as I mentioned, plays like a 2.5D action platformer, so what that means is you're pretty much going down this side-scrolling platformer, but you can interact with the 3D environments, and also you can kind of change levels as far as the 3D goes. So if there's like a winding path or there's like an item in the distance, as far as your imagination, it's likely that you can reach and interact with it. And this was really cool because of all the puzzle solving that could be had here with that element. A unique platforming ability to Klonoa is the ability to jump off of carried enemies. So pretty much Klonoa can tether an enemy and use them as a kind of trampoline to jump off. So the platforming finesse is pretty much your ability to kind of chain together all of these captured enemies, allowing you to gain greater height and collect those items or collectibles. That's pretty much the bread and butter of Klonoa. You can also use enemies to throw into other enemies or throw and break these eggs to gain some more items. Interestingly enough, the Wii version does give you a waggle motion control which conjures up this wind, and this will stun your enemies or even allow you to interact with the environment in certain ways. At the end of each zone, you also are faced with a boss fight, and I found the boss fights to be pretty entertaining, and I did like the amount of variety here, even though each boss fight just kind of required you to capture one of his minions and throw it back at him. For replayability, you have your collectible tokens in each stage, and then you have an overworld map to kind of track your progress and how many tokens you're behind. Next up, we got Pandora's Tower at 95. So I'm a sucker for storylines that pit the hero against inevitable forces of nature, whether that be a curse or a moon fated to crash into the planet, or even these guardians of the planet that you have to take down in order to make this pact with the demon. Same goes for Pandora's Tower, and it's why I was really drawn into the narrative. And the course of this game, I just got so invested in all the things going on. Pretty much my poor paraphrasing of this story is that there's this kingdom of vegetarians, and their princess gets afflicted with this curse that turns her into this kind of body horror nightmare. And it's here that the protagonist needs to venture into these series of towers and kind of gather all this beast flesh to feed her girlfriend.
If you don't act to help her, she won't be human much longer.
I just love the implication that this is a kingdom of vegetarians, and so she's forced to eat this meat. It's pretty gruesome stuff. It reminds me of like the dark fantasy you'd get out of like Shadow of Colossus or even Nier. And I feel like Pandora's Tower ties in this element so well to the gameplay to create this sense of urgency. So the format of the game is pretty much half of a hack and slash action adventure and also half of a dating sim as well. And one of the core mechanics is this kind of curse meter which progresses over time. The more you explore Pandora's Towers, the more she transforms and becomes disfigured. And you can see, so every time you come back from a tower trek, there's pretty much this trail of slime from her bedroom, and depending on how far your meter has gone, you'll see her become this kind of grotesque thing. I really love the kind of visceral responses from both characters. I think the characterization here is so well. You can just see that horror on the protagonist's face as he uncovers Elena. Alright, let's talk about the action adventuring aspect to the game. So obviously you go on these tower hikes and each tower has their own theme to it, as well as the variety of enemies. I really like that each tower didn't feel like a linear experience because you have these kind of indicators in the entrance in the form of these giant chains. So if you ever want to branch off to some secret area, you're not punished because you can just follow those chains to get back on track to your main objective. A core component of the gameplay is making use of this chain. So there are a lot of uses to this chain, such as hookshotting through chasms. You can also use it to open doors, and even for some puzzle solving context. And then you'll encounter the enemies, which you can use your weapon to attack in conjunction with your chain as well. So this includes throwing them around. You can also tether enemies to each other to immobilize them. It was really cool that you can target an enemy specific body part to kind of immobilize them, such as the leg or the tail. The game mechanics here are surprisingly deep with many combat options. I think the only thing holding it back is the frame rate dips. Dipping in the 15 frames it feels, making combat kind of feel clunky at times. I'm just saying it would do so much better with the FPS overhaul. I feel like this game would do so well today on the current gen consoles. But this being my only complaint of the combat, it is topped off with a light RPG system, such as upgrades, requiring armor, and even newer weapons to add to the enjoyment. The boss fights here, they are grand and creative in design. Most of them just require you to kind of use your whip to pull out certain aspects of the core in the bosses, and you can at least feel that sense of David and Goliath type moments because, again, they're just very menacing in appearance, as you can see here. As for the graphics, they're alright. Some areas of the tower look nice, while other areas are a little muddled in appearance, reminding me of a kind of PS2 era video game. And also sometimes the camera angles are a little rough. Because this is a fixed camera, you are wrestling with the camera. Similar to the old school Resident Evil series, there are a lot of frustrating angles, especially when you're in a battle or trying to figure out a certain puzzle solving thing. But thankfully, this is offset by the amazing operatic score here. You'll get used to these operatic lulls and harmonies to kind of lend to this fantasy-driven world here. But ultimately, guys, this was a very nice package of a game, especially for someone like me that loves these kind of coalesce of gameplay mechanics. You got your dating sim, and you have a pretty interesting action adventuring game. And of course, the main thing is that the world building here, as far as the struggle of the curse and the kind of mysterious towers, really drew me into this kind of dark fantasy world. Ranked at number 26, Little King's Story. So guys, what you see here is my kingdom. This was pretty much the culmination of my hard work, commanding these citizens and also conquering lands. If this gameplay style kind of reminds you of Pikmin, that's because this draws heavily on the Pikmin series, so you can pretty much command an army of citizens. This is pretty much a kind of king simulator mixed in with a adventuring game. So the story starts off that you're this little kid that kind of wanders off into this kingdom. For some reason you're crowned king, but pretty much you start off with a pocket of citizens, and each of them have like their own special gimmick to them. Some can dig holes in the ground, while others can chop down obstacles that are trees. And the more you kind of gather these supplies and riches, the more you can build the infrastructure for your kingdom. So the first half of this game is of course the kingdom building, while the second half is adventuring in other lands, trying to kind of take territory from these enemies called the Omi. And the enemies here, they can be attacked using your citizens, of course. Preferably the soldier class is best as dealing with these, and these goes for the boss fights as well. Eventually you'll be able to bring back those spoils so you can build the infrastructure in your town, such as building new farms, new buildings, and faculties. And then you can read citizens' complaints in the suggestion box. Some of them mean and some of them bordering on hilarious. You can also do things like hold festivals after you fill a boss, or tax citizens based off all the resident houses you build. These neat little nods to being a king really lended to the simulation, and it's done in such a charming way, with the conversations with your citizens reminding me of random funny quips from 90s Nickelodeon show. So this is the whole gameplay loop here, and it's very addicting. Little King's Story achieves this with wholesome vibes, something reminding me of how I felt playing Stardew Valley or even Animal Crossing, but more emphasis on the kingdom building and the adventuring rather than the sim aspect. I especially love the cel-shaded cutscenes that would occasionally take place. The art style here seems to resemble that of a child's storybook, which was very fitting for the theme. Certainly if you're looking for a different kind of Pikmin experience, but with more of an emphasis on farming and kingdom simulation coalesced with adventuring, then this is definitely a good choice. So all the way at 62, we have Sin and Punishment Star Successor. Alright guys, hear me out. I suck at these kind of games. Any kind of shoot 'em up or side-scrolling shooter like Ikaruga, for example, or Toho. I'm just so bad at it. I don't know, my hand-eye coordination's bad. Sin and Punishment has proven that with grounded gameplay, forgiving checkpoints, and just an overall strong visual style, the genre can definitely win me over with some patience. I have to emphasize that this game is still hard as hell. The game plays like a light rail shooter, with the occasional shift to 2D run and gun perspective, your only control being your character's on-screen lateral movement. And then with the Wiimote, you're able to shoot your enemy or the environment around them, which includes a charge blast and a neat melee attack deflecting certain projectiles. There's also a dodge roll and a jump giving you some frames of invincibility, but despite having these options, the game was still hard as hell, at least for myself. Bosses will take you out in a few hits while also cornering you in these wave of attacks that make you feel claustrophobic. The armies of enemies here are just relentless, and it's all combined in this long gauntlet of trials. For example, one stage might make you fight 3 bosses in succession with waves of enemies in between. There are just barely any breaks here, and this is made for a very sweaty experience. But despite all of this, I found myself coming back because behind a seemingly mindless shooter lies a good-looking, addicting puzzle and exploration game. Let me explain. Not only are the background visuals amazing, but also very interactable. Stages take you through these imaginative, futuristic settings, everything from built-in underwater tunnels to a city ridden with war and destruction. You can sometimes get winded by how much there is to see, but I was relieved to find out that many of the elements in the background can be interacted with, whether you're shooting certain points of interest, which unlocks health boxes or medals, or shooting down a tall building or a fire barrel to take out groups of enemies. Pretty much if it looks inconspicuous, I would go ahead and throw a charge shot that way because it really might help in turning the tides. Some areas of the background also need to be interacted with to gain access to other areas, such as a lever or these little boxes that give more passageway. In each stage you are ambushed by several bosses, and they are grand in design, and despite the difficulty fighting them, it does become a kind of exploratory experience because you soon find out that a well-timed charge blast is able to interrupt their attack, or even a well-placed melee attack can deflect their projectiles and dish out some good damage. So it really does negate this game being just a mindless shooter. There's a lot of contextual bits here, and it's going to take some brain and some timing as well as some reflexes to really get the most out of the gameplay here. I also have to mention how forgiving the checkpoints are in this game. So there are several checkpoints tucked into each stage or even boss phase. Despite having elements of a tough rail shooter or shoot 'em up, I was never compelled to kind of put my controller down and rage quit, but rather just jump back in and try for a higher score. Some neat features are a 2-player mode, and also there's an alternate character you can play known as Kachi. She offers a different playstyle in the sense of her melee attack and also her charge blast, so that's cool too. So once you figure out the kinks of sin and punishment, it does become an enjoyable experience, but it's gonna take a lot of patience. So probably one of my most favorite titles on this list, Opuna at 86. It sucks knowing that the number of JRPGs out there that are amazing will more than likely be skipped just because of how much investment it takes to get into one of these games. We're talking drawn out stories, a tedious battle system, and sometimes kind of overwritten characters, but in the case of Opuna, I think this is very well worth your time. Don't get me wrong, this game is still plagued by some of these problems, but I feel like it's kind of overridden by the well-written, zany characters in this game, a unique turn-based battle system as well to kind of hold you over, and then of course you have the amazing soundtrack and the amazing world that they kind of painted for you here. What starts off as a spacefaring vacation amongst a family plummets into a ship attack out of an episode of Star Trek, and suddenly the family are separated, scattered amongst planets, hoping for the next time they'd be reunited again. A very bare-bones summary of the premise, but what's worth noting is that this is a fun sci-fi-like story, sprinkled in with the quirky and random humor you'd expect from, say, the Earthbound series. You play as the oblong-shaped protagonist, Opuna, as he scours each planet, trying to make sense of that fateful day, but also cementing himself as the most helpful intergalactic Samaritan there is. He does this by taking up jobs around the galaxy, which gives access to a core part of this game, the job and license system. So for myself, this was a very enjoyable feature to this game, and also to kind of lend to the sci-fi world. Some of these jobs are ridiculous, like being a food delivery boy for these luxury citizens, and then some of them are just hilarious, like being a fortune teller for all these desperate people. I always appreciated those special ingredients to the JRPG genre. For example, Persona had their kind of social link for other characters, and in this game, this is no exception. There's a lot of depth here for sure. And the aforementioned job system also helps you in the adventuring portion of the game. For example, there is this job that you can take on to kind of drill through rocks that impede through your path. So you go through with that quest line and you help this dude catch a sand seal. Eventually he'll give you the mining license, which you can then use to drill through rocks and gather minerals that way. So there's definitely incentive there rather than just the social aspect. And although the graphics are nothing to gawk at, the game really does well in capturing this picturesque kind of atmosphere that you would expect going on a spacefaring adventure. And it does this resoundingly with what I think to be one of the best video game soundtracks in any JRPG. I'm a sucker for really lovely soundtracks, and in Opuna's case, this soundtrack definitely holds a candle to the greats like Final Fantasy or Nier. The composers here really went all in, and in my opinion, this is definitely the strongest aspect of Opuna's art direction and design. So the music in the areas are great, but also keep in mind that these areas are also prone to those random encounters that you'd find in any other JRPG. So if you're tired of turn-based combat, I think Opuna will be a refreshing experience for you, at least it was for myself. This is an active time battle system, meaning quick thinking will be your best friend because there are no turns here. As soon as your energy meter fills, then you must make a quick decision. and it's independent of your opponent's turn. They will attack you as soon as they're ready, so you'll have to think quick. Along with a list of special abilities, the core of the combat comes from Opuna's manipulation of his bonbon. That's the circular thing above his head, but pretty much it's here that the Opuna's JRPG combat stands out from the rest. So to put in a few words, the combat feels like a glorified baseball pitcher game mixed in with JRPG elements. What I mean is that holding back on your control stick will prep Opuna to launch his bonbon, and you can lean left or right to determine a curvature, which is vital in hitting enemies that are hidden behind objects or hovering in the air. You also get access to this spirit mechanic later in the game, which generates a random spirit floating around the battle floor. Hitting them grants special effects such as wiping out a group of enemies or even granting a group heal, which was pretty neat. Starting off, the difficulty will be pretty hard to adjust to, but once you master these mechanics, it does become very rewarding and it does become reasonably difficult later on in the game. Offset by the option to equip Opuna's bonbon with all these different modifications, such as a fire element or the ability to go through several enemies. I'm really ranting at this point, but you guys need to understand how much I needed a game like this. Amongst all the dark themes and serious undertones found in most video games I play, this was really refreshing, and Epona knows exactly what they are. They don't take themselves too seriously, but inject enough charm and humor in all the characters and world building to make you care enough. I really laughed out loud when I diagnosed this patient who seemingly had no ailment but just a longing for their lover, and I mean, who wouldn't relate, you know? There are also these in-game museums with these set of displays and artwork. It's just all of these little references and small little relatable things that really made me enjoy this game. And I feel like that was the whole point on the developers' part. They obviously were having fun doing this, and they just wanted us to appreciate all the smaller things that we might take for granted. Ranked at number 43, Muramasa the Demon Blade. I think my favorite thing about Muramasa Demon Blade is just the inspirations of Japanese folklore to spruce up the world building. Everything from Kappa children hiding under bridges to the countless reference to yokai and the enemy and bosses. They even make references to Japan's Shinto Buddhism figures such as gods, which become some of the more titular boss fights. The themes here are just a love letter to those that like Japanese literature. As for the gameplay format, as I said, this is a side-scroller beat-em-up sprinkled in with some RPG elements. You are essentially traveling from area to area, navigating trees, caves, castles, etc. And hidden within each, you'll find items and equipment for your benefit, but you may also encounter waves of enemies, and the combat here requires you to juggle the use of 3 katanas, each with varying properties and skills. So accumulating combos and killing enemies grants you these souls, which with continued use gives you the ability to do an all-out attack when switching katanas. And that's kind of the core mechanic of this game. You're trying to build up this soul meter to do that switching attack because the attack really just obliterates everything in your path. It's a simple but refined system, and it does make up for the lack of attack options here. The combos are very sparse, and it at least turns the focus to gathering souls for that all-out attack, as well as avoiding enemy contact, because in this game, the enemy hitboxes can just be relentless, man. The bosses here, they introduce Dark Souls-like difficulty, and a dodge roll given to you will be like your best friend here, as well as the memorization of boss attack patterns. There's also the option to block. This essentially degrades the health of your katanas, and it's really used for a kind of last-ditch effort. You really are better off dodge rolling. There's an upgrade system here where you consult with Muramasa, a katana forger, to build you new swords. This was a addicting part of the game for me, because there's just so many katana options here, and they all are attached with these new abilities and passive effects. I thought it really cool that stronger katanas are kind of tied to your progress with both optional characters. Completing a katana upgrade route with one grants you access to stronger katana upgrades with the other. Oh, I forgot to mention, you are given the option to play as a girl or a guy protagonist, each with varying storylines by the way. I think the best way to play this game is playing both characters concurrently to get the best out of this game, and it'll reward you with an expanded storyline with which each intersects several times, and it eventually gives access to a penultimate final boss. Sadly, the playstyles don't really vary here, they're just more visual overhauls than anything. All in all, Vanillaware knocked it out with this one. The visual style here made me feel like I was just walking amongst a Japanese painting, and it really scratched that itch for the lover of Japan mythology in me. Vanillaware has made a monopoly in making these side-scroller RPG games, and you can definitely see that in Muramasa Demon Blade. Ranked at number 4, Super Mario Galaxy 2. So I remember playing the first Super Mario Galaxy and how much it had an impact on me and my love for Mario platformers. So the sequel clearly expanded upon the ideas of the first, but maintained some originality with new features such as a drill form, the ability to use Yoshi, and of course they went the mission-based route with each level being an enclosed theme and set piece. I think the argument of which Galaxy title is superior can go both ways, but one thing for certain about SM Galaxy 2 is that they definitely pushed the difficulty to greater lengths, and this could be attributed to the level designs. In my opinion, we'll get more intricate levels with Galaxy 2. In one level, you're racing against the clock as you try to make it to the end of the galaxy, being seemingly ripped apart by these saw blades. Then there's this cleverly designed stage where the sense of gravity is being routed every few seconds, making for some tricky platforming. My hat goes off to the especially tough and long Bowser stages from each zone. The game is just such a great example of good game design, and I can see influences of this one bleed over into Super Mario Land and even Odyssey. The Galaxy titles definitely walked so these other Mario platformers could run. But I guess you can expect no less from a Mario game. There is one thing about Galaxy 2 that I think would interest Mario fans. Several stages are just an ode to the Mario franchise in terms of the level theme as well as the music. In my playthrough of Galaxy 2, I was reminded of the haunting theme found in Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo, as well as the iconic Bowser stage themes, taking me all the way back to the N64. One level is just a one-to-one reimagining of a beloved stage from the Super Mario 64 title. This game is no doubt a celebration of how far this franchise has come, and I can't wait for what they give us next. Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end. This was definitely one of my more fun videos. The Wii was such a treasured console for myself. Let me know if you have any recommendations as far as hidden treasures on the Wii, and I hope to see y'all in the next one. Take care.